start off by introducing yourself and the character playing the show.
I'm Allsun O'Malley. I'm playing Maria. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm a rising sophomore at Penn State.
And I'm Jordan Andre, and I am from Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm playing Tony, and I will be a rising senior at the University of Michigan.
Okay. Have any of you ever been in West Side Story before? Is this your first time, or?
I have been in West Side Story. I was a shark. I was Teresita, my sophomore year in high school.
Okay, so you know a little bit about the show.
Yeah, a little bit.
And it'll be a first for me.
First. Okay. What did you like about the roles? What made you want to be, try out for Marie and Tony? And why these roles? Not that I don't know the answer, but.
Go ahead.
I mean, West Side Story is such a pivotal musical to American musical theater, and I think it's extremely historic and classical, and it's got a great story. I mean, it's the musical version of Romeo and Juliet, and I think the show is known for its choreography, it's known for its music, it's known for Jerome Robbins, who's a Broadway legend as a director, and Stephen Sondheim, who made his debut with the show and is now, of course, one of the most celebrated composers and lyricists in the industry. So with that in mind, I think that's, to be a part of that in really any way is fantastic.
Yeah, I think that being a part of the show in general is something that I've always wanted to do. Even after I already was in it, but a
bigger role this time.
A bigger role, and I mean, I've always wanted to play Maria, and to be playing it in a show with an amazing cast and a kind of incredible creative team is honestly a dream come true. It's just it's been such an amazing experience, and even if I wasn't playing Maria, I would want to be a part of it in some way because it's such a special group of people here.
So this is your guys' first season at the Wagon Wheel?
First season at the Wagon Wheel.
Okay. So this is in the round, obviously. Have you guys ever been in the round before, or?
I have, when I was little.
Okay.
When I was very little. But.
My first professional job was in the round.
Okay.
At a dinner theater, nonetheless, as well. So not only were we performing, we also were servers before the show and during intermission as well. So kind of double duty. So, but no, I love the round. It's really great.
Okay. So a lot of people might be used to, seeing the movie version or maybe seeing it on, a normal stage.
Right.
How is this done any differently in the round, or is it still the same show, or is it you got to think differently to do this show, or?
I think the show itself is so set in stone, and just in terms of the story, I think you definitely, of course, have to adapt it to the round, and I think Scott has done a really great job at putting his own spin on it, and I think making it necessary to fit the needs of Wagon Wheel and who our company is this for the summer, while maintaining the integrity of what is known to be West Side Story.
And a lot of people, obviously, who have not seen it live, may have seen it in the movie version. Does this follow? Is there a lot of differences, or is it pretty much the same, maybe?
There are some differences, mainly in the order of the show. Things happen a little bit differently in the musical, but it has the same music, the same story, obviously.
The script is really different. They definitely changed it and adapted it to the screen. So there's definitely some notable differences just in terms of dialogue. And then also the order of the show, the songs, and then who also sings the songs. Like in the movie, America is sung by or with the men, sharks, and the women. And the stage production is done just the women.
I think that it's also, in my personal opinion, I saw the movie when I was very young, and I think that and I was completely taken with it. But then I saw it on stage, and it became so much more magical, and so much more real. I think there's an element that the stage version brings that you can't always get in the movie.
Okay. You mentioned it's kind of a modernization, well, 1957, but modernization of Romeo and Juliet, and there's different modernizations of Romeo and Juliet. What is so compelling about that particular love story that makes that West Side Story kind of adds to it, that makes it stand out more than other kind of modernization of Romeo and Juliet?
I think it's the power of music. It's the power of being able to tell a story that doesn't end well, and within that mindset of Romeo and Juliet, I think, in addition to what made West Side Story so pivotal, was because it became musical theater, it became musical drama, and it became, you know, I don't know what I'm getting at. It's just being able to musicalize Romeo and Juliet. I think it's done so well in this show.
I also think that the issue of racism is so prominent in our society, and it is. I mean, it was back then, and it is, and it still is now, and it has been throughout the, how many years has it been since 60, 50, something like that. Yeah. But it's something that everyone can relate to, and it's something that really hits home for people, and I think that's
and the implications that prejudice can have on love, I think is especially wrought in West Side Story. I think, you know, race isn't really dealt with in Romeo and Juliet. I think definitely heritage is, and family ties. So I think when you adapt Romeo and Juliet and you have a modernization of Romeo and Juliet, what makes West Side Story so unique is that not only do you have this story of lovers coming from opposite sides, but then you have this whole, you know, historical dramaturgy of, you know, prejudice and discrimination and the immigrant experience.
Makes it very provocative.
It does. No, it really does. And there's one scene in the show where Lieutenant Schrank says to the Jets something along the lines of immigrant scum, and a lot of the Jet guys are recognized as being Polacks. So not only, you know, I think the Sharks do get victimized because, I mean, there is that give and take, but then I think, especially for the Jets, coming to America, I mean, it's, you know, the 1950s. I mean, they're, if not second generation immigrants. So I think it's very prevalent in terms of this new America, and I think everyone's really trying to make it. I think it's not just, I don't know, maybe I'm biased because I'm, you know, a Jet, but I think, you know, the Jets are still trying to figure out just as much as the Sharks are. And so I think it's a really great coming together of the immigrant experience that adds a really unique spin to the Romeo and Juliet story.
Well, you guys, one of my questions was going to be about themes in the show, which you guys covered. But if you even modernized this even more, went from the 1950s to 2015, would it be darker? Would it be about the same? Would it be, I mean, the same issue still exists?
I think it would be dark either way. I think that racism itself is very dark, and I think that no matter what time period you're in, there has been, and there, until a better world is created, there will always be some racism, and there will always be hate. And if it was to be set now, it would be just as dark. It would be, even though the issues are slightly different, it would be just as dark, and just as full of hate and anger, I think.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, not to cut you off, sorry.
Yeah.
That issue is, can people get anything positive from the show? I mean, like you said, there's a lot of darkness, but I mean, there is a love story in there. So what's the opposite
I think
of darkness?
that is definitely the redeeming factor.
Yeah.
I think it is extremely beautiful. I think, you know, beauty comes out of the ashes of this, you know, turmoil. And, you know, Maria has her ending Act 2 speech that says, you know, at what point do we, you know, realize that this is because of us that we, you know, that this happened.
There's a hopeful, I would say there's, like what you were just saying,
Yeah.
there's a hopeful quality, and the difference between Romeo and Juliet and West Side Story mainly is that Maria lives at the end. Maria doesn't die, she doesn't kill herself, she lives, and that brings about a kind of a sense of hope, and spoiler alert, Maria lives, sorry.
I was gonna say it, but since you did,
Yeah.
Sorry. and there's kind of a coming together, and I think that really that's a kind of a bright light in the show. And although it's a very dark ending, there is a brightness.
Maria is definitely a light, and I think she wears the white dress for a reason. I mean, she is the image of purity and innocence and what it is to be naive. Within that, also what it means to be forgiving, what it means to be merciful, what it means to love someone else despite the differences you might have. And so definitely, and I saw the 2009 revival in New York, and it's interesting. Arthur Lawrence directed that production, and he wrote the book for the show. It's really interesting because you can play to those different elements very well and very succinctly, and the production in New York contemporized the production very well. But at the same time, I think the message of the show will always remain the same. I think you can always have. There's always going to be dark elements, but I think there's always, and I'm very optimistic and try to think about the positive light, and just like, hey, you know what can we gain from this experience? What can we learn? And I think ultimately, that's why I do what I do as an actor, feeling like I can share what it is to be human and and a piece of humanity, and just knowing that despite our differences and despite issues that we might have, that we can look to the future, kind of thing.
Talk a little bit about the songs. There's a lot of well-known songs. Like I said, I've been getting a few stuck in my head over the past couple of days. What is about the songs that are so, like, I mean, they're just catchy as...
Well, they do, unlike some, these songs in the songs in West Side Story, most of them, actually all of them, they move the plot somehow, and they're written so beautifully.
And provide such culture. And I mean, Leonard Bernstein was a genius. You know, there are progressions that are in Something's Coming that allude to the same progressions in Maria. There's just, I think even what I think is, I always listen to Officer Krupke and think to dramatize a scene of young teenage guys, you know, mocking and patronizing the law, and being able to musicalize that in an entertaining and really fun way. I think I could never do that. I really couldn't. And so you just, you know, I think really, you know, I played the soundtrack a couple times, and there's moments where you're just like, oh my gosh, like I remember listening to this as a kid, but you never really realize. I mean, I grew up on like Les Mis and Phantom and West Side, and I think, you know, I think it's so, musical theater in and of itself, I think, is so buried in American culture, whether we realize it or not, in my opinion.
It definitely is.
So I think a lot of those, whether it's Maria, whether it's Something's Coming, whether it's I Feel Pretty, you know, are so well recognized, and I think, you know, you hear it and you're like, I've heard this before, you know. It's sweeping, it's
very well written.
Very well written.
Very
it's beautiful.
Timeless.
Yeah, timeless.
Let me ask you a few questions about yourselves. How and when did you get into musical theater and doing theater? Do you remember the first time you said, I want to do that?
I was in elementary school. I was in, well, actually, when I was younger, I was very little. I was about 5 or 4, and my mom used to take me to musicals almost every single weekend. It was our little getaway, and it was always so fun. And not only did I go see the show, but I went home remembering most of the lyrics in the songs, and I'd put on my own version. Like, oh, I was a weird kid, but you know, it brought me so much happiness and so much joy, and I didn't ever think that I could do it. It was just like a fun little thing that I did in my basement with my dolls in costumes. But in 5th grade, I started to perform in children's theater, and I knew in 5th grade that there was nothing else that I really wanted to do, and it's been a very big part of my life throughout middle school and through high school, and I'm very lucky to have opportunities like this. I really am, especially at the Wagon Wheel Theater.
For me, I remember my first theater experience and production that I was involved in was kindergarten, and we put on a narrative version of Peter Rabbit. And I was one of the there was 4 narrators, and I was one of the narrators. I think I like jealously wanted to be the singular narrator. That sounds really bad. That sounds really bad. And no, but you know, and I grew up in the church, and was involved in the church choir, and kind of had always sung. My parents met in a band, so I think music was always a big part of my family. And then did the elementary musical, did the middle school musicals, and I think I really got hooked on musical theater when I played the Beast in Beauty and the Beast my sophomore year of high school. I don't think, you know, because I had always been involved in a lot of stuff, whether it was rec sports or you know, various hobbies, whatever.
All American boy stuff.
Yeah, very, very. Baseball. I did soccer. I played lacrosse. I did reading. I was really into cooking at one point. And so I was really trying. You know, I think not that I found myself, but I think you just try and find your niche. And so within that production of Beauty and the Beast, I think I really found what I do well and what I really love to do. Again, that piece of sharing what it is to be human, and being able to get away with it in musicals and singing and acting, and you're just like, hey, I get to escape and be somebody else for a little bit. And so I really fell in love with it then, and I don't know, here I am now.
I think that, especially because I think that I realized that it also, like you said, you get to escape and you get to become someone else. But I think when I really knew that I wanted to do this, like really knew, was when I realized that it provides an escape for other people too. Yeah. You know, it's not just you. It's not theater is not, being an actor is not a selfish thing. You know, you are providing an escape for people, for business people who come to the theater after work, and for so many others.
Really, anybody.
It's a beautiful thing to provide that for people, and to be a part of it in any way, whether you're part of the cast, the creative team, you're part of it in some way, and I think it's beautiful.
Just being that whole process of sharing, and I think especially with West Side, I think it's, you know, it's such an emotional journey that as an audience and as an actor, and really as a company of performers, that we all take together, and I think that's what's really beautiful.
So how long are you guys here this season? The rest of the season? Part of the season? How many shows? Or?
Well, I'm here till Bye Bye Birdie, and then I'm going back to Boston to work at Regal Music Theater for the remainder of the summer.
And I will be here for Bye Bye Birdie, playing Conrad Birdie, and then I will be in The Addams Family, playing Val Beinecke, and I'll be in the company of A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
you
you.
so much.